Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the dim, grim world of early surgery, before anesthesia, before antiseptics, before sanity, really. Imagine this. You're lying flat on a blood-streaked wooden table in a cold room, lit only by sputtering candlelight. The floor is sticky. The man approaching you has red-stained hands, a thick apron, and a saw that rattles slightly in his grip. He nods once. You don't nod back. You can't. You're already regretting this decision. There's no gown, no chart, and definitely no sedation. Instead, a couple of strong lads are holding your limbs down, and someone's stuffing a rolled-up leather strap into your mouth. You probably won't survive this, not because of the wound, but because of what they're about to do to fix it. So before the saw makes its first charming little squeal, do yourself a favor. Subscribe now, before you black out from historical empathy. Seriously, it might be the last decision you make with all your limbs attached. And hey, I know you're probably horizontal right now, drifting, but don't let sleep win until you've tapped that bell. Like the video or the ghost of 18th century Willem, the overconfident surgeon might come explain humoral theory in your dreams. Now dim those lights. Let the fan hum. Let the fear settle. You're no longer in your bed. You're in history's least sterile operating room. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in 18th century Europe, or maybe earlier. It honestly doesn't matter, because the basics haven't changed much. You've got a nasty infection on your leg. It's red swollen and smells faintly of decay. The local healer suggests amputation. Your friends agree. Apparently, it's either that or wait for the rot to climb its way into your bloodstream. You're not taken to a hospital. No such thing exists in any comforting, sterile sense. Instead, you're carted into a back room of the local apothecary, or worse, into someone's home who owes the barber a favor. The table you're laid on is more accustomed to holding fish or firewood. There's a candle at your feet, flickering as if it's already seen how this ends. The surgeon enters. His name might be John, or Willem, or Luke. Again, doesn't matter. What matters is that he's confident. Maybe too confident. He's done this a dozen times. Most of the patients survived the week. Some even kept their other limbs. His apron is stained, but he smiles reassuringly. That's not comforting. He's sharpening a blade. You don't know if it's for you or lunch later. A young boy enters, carrying a bucket, metal-dented, half full of something that used to be water. That's for washing the instruments, you assume, although the instruments don't look particularly interested in being washed. You're told to hold still. That's funny. You try, but your body tenses. Sweat forms instantly. You bite down hard on the strap. It smells of old leather and someone else's teeth. And then it begins. The blade cuts into. There's no numbing, just flesh and willpower. You try not to scream, but you do. Everyone does. The pain is immediate, bright, and total. It's like being set on fire from the inside. You smell your own blood. You see stars. You wonder if you'll faint. Then you do. When you wake up, something's different. Your leg is shorter. Your soul possibly too. This isn't the only method of surgery, of course. Different cultures tried different things. In India, early texts describe surgery with tools made of obsidian and iron. In Mesoamerica, bone setting and trepanation were surprisingly advanced. But across most of medieval and early modern Europe, surgery, without anesthesia, followed the same basic playbook. Pain now questions later. You've likely heard the phrase, bite the bullet. It comes from this world. In battlefields or makeshift operating tents, soldiers would literally bite on a musket ball while their limb was sawed off. It was either that or scream into the void. Leather was more common, less dental risk. But hey, who's thinking about teeth when your femur's about to become firewood? And here's a tidbit for your next trivia night. In some towns, you could hire people to scream for you during surgery. Not a joke. Their job was to shout wail and distract the crowd, or maybe even distract you from what was actually happening. A medieval scream team, if you will. Historians still argue whether patients actually requested to remain conscious as some sort of brave gesture, or whether everyone was just out of options. The concept of knocking someone out was known in theory. Some herbalists used opium or mandrake root, but dosage was inconsistent, and many feared it would kill the patient outright. Better to risk pain than a poison, they thought. Not much of a choice. And yet, people lived. Sometimes, a clean amputation, done quickly, 30 seconds or less, meant a chance of survival. The fastest surgeons were the most celebrated. A London surgeon named Robert Liston could amputate a leg in under 25 seconds. He once did it so fast, he accidentally sliced off his assistant's fingers and cut through the coattails of a spectator. Both died. The patient, too. That's right. 3 deaths in 1 surgery. A record that still stands. You're lucky, sort of. You're stitched up using catgut or horsehair. Maybe there's a poultice of honey or mold slapped over the wound. something vaguely antiseptic by accident. Someone offers you a drink. Not water. That'd be dangerous. No, this is ale or wine, hopefully strong enough to make you forget what just happened. Your head is spinning. Your leg feels like it's still there, and also very much not. You're not sure if this is phantom pain or just regular agony. Either way, you're alive. For now, you don't get much rest. The pain, now a permanent house guest, has decided to host a symphony in your nerves. It plays without rhythm, without mercy, and without intermission. Sleep comes only in gasps, like a dying man catching air. You're swaddled in rough linen, stained and stiff, and someone, probably your aunt, keeps insisting that you just need to let the wound breathe, as though air alone will redeem what the saw has done. The next day, they change your dressing. Change is generous. They peel it off like bark from a tree, ripping the fabric from raw flesh. The pain is a lot. You bite your tongue this time instead of the strap. Blood again. It's all red, everywhere red. You're starting to forget what other colors look like. The healer hums as he works. He tells you it's going well. You can't help but notice his hands shake a little. He's doing his best, you suppose. After all, no one really trains for this. There's no license, no diploma on the wall. His only credential is surviving longer than the people he treats. That and a solid grip. He picks up the saw and sets it on the table near your head. You pretend not to notice. You ask, why isn't there anything to make this easier? No potion, no spell, no shot to take the edge off? He nods, solemn, then hands you something. It's a strip of leather. Again, you see, in a world without anesthesia, pain is part of the process. It's the ghost in every room, the uninvited guest at every procedure, and the tools. They're not helping. You hear stories from the next town over. Someone tried to numb a wound with snow. Another man chewed willow bark before an operation. It helped a little. That's the origin of aspirin, actually. Willow bark crushed and bitter taken by those who had no other hope. But it's subtle. You need chemistry for real results, and the 1700s aren't exactly swimming in lab coats and microscopes, so instead they give you something to bite. Again, it's always something to bite. Sometimes it's leather. Sometimes it's wood. One poor soul in Austria was handed a thin rod of iron to clench between his teeth. He broke 3 molars before the surgeon even made the first cut. And then there's screaming. You don't plan to do it. It just happens. The body has its own voice in these moments. It comes from your spine, not your lungs. A raw, involuntary thing. You're told to hold still. That's funny. They bind your arms and legs, not out of cruelty, but necessity. The moment your body starts thrashing, precision flies out the window. A wrong move, and they're sawing through bone at an angle, or worse, sawing into something they weren't supposed to. Surgery was often a group effort. Not for technique, there was no teamwork drill, but for restraint. Strong men held you down. You can't help but imagine their faces sweating and gritting their own teeth as your body writhes beneath them. Your cousin once told you that a woman in Florence survived an abdominal surgery while fully awake. She was told to remain still for over an hour while a large ovarian tumor was removed. They say she whispered prayers through gritted teeth and never screamed. You think she must have been a saint or just very determined not to die. In another case, a man undergoing surgery on his hand demanded to watch the entire thing. He leaned forward to examine the cut tendons and ligaments, taking notes as the surgeon worked. It's said he passed out only after the stitching began. Respect, there are stories. Always stories of people who walked themselves to the table, sat upright for the entire ordeal, then thanked the surgeon afterward. You wonder if the stories are true, or if they're the kind people tell to soften the sharp edge of memory. Historians still argue whether those who survived did so because of some inborn toughness or just dumb luck. Was there something in their constitution that let them handle pain better than others? Or did they simply have smaller nerves? No one knows. Maybe no one wants to know. And the sound. Don't forget the sound. The saw doesn't glide. It grinds. With each push and pull, it stutters against your bone like a dull carpenter's blade meeting a knot in the wood. There's no hiding from it, no unhearing it. The scream of metal through flesh, through sinew, through everything that used to be you. Some say it's worse than the pain. And yet, there's a kind of respect for the process, a kind of grim ceremony. Before each operation, there's a moment of stillness, like the space before a thunderclap. People wait. They nod. They accept. You've heard of pain trials. They were unofficial, of course. Challenges among patients or among young surgeons trying to prove their mettle. Who could last longer under the blade? Who could remain conscious the longest? One man allegedly laughed through an entire tooth extraction. He became a local legend, mostly because he never laughed again. You wonder, what's worse, pain during the operation or the fever that comes after? Because now it's setting in. Your skin feels too tight. Your thoughts stretch out like threads fraying at the edges. You're not sure what day it is, or if your leg is still there, or if you are. They bring in a mirror. You don't ask for it. You don't want it. But they say it's healing nicely. You look. It's not. The stump is red raw and angry. It twitches sometimes without warning. Your body's way of reminding you what it lost. Someone lights incense. Not for you, for the smell. Your room is starting to reek, and there are whispers about infection. You hear the word sepsis. You don't know what it means. They don't either. But it sounds bad. You close your eyes, not to sleep, just to pretend. And in the quiet, you wonder how many others have done this. Sat in your place, bit the strap, screamed the scream. Too many to count. You are not alone. But that doesn't make it any easier. You're barely into the third day when someone brings in a small clay bowl filled with what looks like worms. They're not. They're leeches. You don't panic yet. Maybe they're for someone else. Maybe the surgeon left his pets out. But no, they're for you. Because today's treatment, bloodletting, they say it balances your humors. You know those mystical bodily fluids, blood phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. According to ancient Greek theory, and still widely believed, where you're lying, sweating too much of any one humor causes disease. And right now, your body's brimming with too much something. So the solution: remove some blood, because less blood equals more balance equals health. In theory, very old theory, the leeches are cold, slimy, and weirdly methodical. They're placed on your thigh, just above the wound. You think one winks at you. It doesn't, but it might as well. Soon they're hard at work, suckling your blood, bloating into disgusting sausages. You feel the tiniest pull, like a mosquito with ambition. But it's not the pain that gets to you. It's the idea that this is what passes for treatment. That this isn't a prank. That the man supervising this was once called a physician with a straight face. Your neighbor, old widow Agnes, swears by leeches, claims they cured her husband's gout. She fails to mention he died 3 days later, but details like that are rarely popular. And if you didn't have leeches, you'd be sliced. A nice little vein opened in the crook of your arm or the back of your ankle. A bowl below to catch your strength as it trickles out. One popular device is the phleem, a spring-loaded blade that flips open your vein in a split second. The speed is impressive. The sanitation, not so much. Still, everyone believes in it. not just the common folk. Kings, queens, noblemen. Louis XIV had bloodletting done over 30 times in a single year. George Washington, sick with a throat infection, was bled of nearly 40% of his blood in one day. He died. The doctors were confused. You are not. And it's not just blood they want gone. Sometimes it's fluids. One treatment involves a purging. Yes, making you vomit on purpose or inducing diarrhea. Because nothing says recovery like being dehydrated, exhausted, and missing a limb. They may also recommend cupping. Hot glass domes pressed against your skin to draw blood to the surface. If you're lucky, it leaves a bruise, if not a blister, or a burn, which, coincidentally, can then be treated with surprise more bloodletting. Historians still argue whether this was all superstition, or if there were some accidental benefits. Did removing infected blood help in a few rare cases? Was the placebo effect powerful enough to convince patients they were improving? It's hard to say. The records are messy. The outcomes, bloodier. And then there's the fringe folks who take it further. In the Middle Ages, some healers believed that sin itself festered in the blood. That illness was punishment. So bleeding wasn't just physical. It was spiritual. You weren't just being treated. You were being cleansed. It sounds familiar to you. You've heard whispers in church sickness as consequence, as divine lesson. It's oddly comforting. If pain has a purpose, maybe it's more bearable. Still, as the bowl at your bedside fills red, you start to wonder how much blood is too much. They don't know. They never really measure. They go by color or how you look. You're pale, they say. It's working, and that's the best case scenario. Worst case. You faint. Your heartbeat slows. They fan you with a damp rag. Sometimes they give you sugar water. Sometimes nothing. A few patients never wake up. But again, details. Oh, and leeches. They don't let go. Not easily. Once full, they detach and squirm lazily in the bowl. But sometimes they cling. You have to coax them off with salt or vinegar. You try not to look. The sight of a half-bloated worm tugging at your skin is the kind of memory that builds trauma in layers. Still, there's something undeniably historical about this moment. You're part of a legacy now. A long chain of people drained, poked, purged, and bled in the name of health. You wonder if future generations will remember you, or if they'll just gawk at the absurdity of it all and whisper, "They actually did that. Yes. Yes, we did." And some still do. Cupping therapy has made a bizarre comeback in some circles. Athletes with deep purple circles on their backs. Wellness influencers promoting detox by suction. Different methods, same ideas. Funny how history doesn't always stay buried. You reach for a cup of water. It's warm, metallic. You drink anyway. Your vision blurs a little. Your fingers are cold. You wonder if that's the bloodletting or the fever. Outside, someone's being carried in. Another surgery, another strap, another scream. The smell of iron lingers, not just in the room, in your mouth, your sweat, your memory. And despite the absurdity, despite the pain, despite the worms and blades and bleeding bowls, you're still here. Somehow, you're not given much notice. One moment, you're blinking through the fuzz of fever. The next, your surgeon stands over you with the urgency of a man late to dinner. He mumbles something about needing to go back in. Something's not healing right. Something smells wrong. Something looks gangrenous. You don't argue. You don't have the strength. And arguing rarely helps anyway, especially when the man holding the saw believes decisiveness is more important than deliberation. The saw. There it is again. He pulls it from a canvas satchel with a small but theatrical flourish. It's rusted in places, missing a tooth or two, and has the unsettling confidence of a tool that's been here before. It looks ready. You're not. You know what's coming. You've done this once already. But this time, the infection is deeper. They can't just cut above the knee and hope for the best. They're talking hip. They're talking high up. They're talking about a procedure that not only removes your leg, but half your chances of surviving the month. You ask if there's an alternative. There isn't. Well, there was. Earlier. When it first started festering. But the town priest said it was just spiritual rot. So you prayed. And now, you're paying. The room smells of sweat vinegar and panic. A young assistant, you think his name is Bart, starts boiling a pot of water. Not for sterilization, of course, just for show. For comfort, to make it feel like something scientific is happening. Then the real preparations begin. You're tied down. Again. This time, tighter. Your wrists throb beneath the bindings, your breath shallow and fast. They offer the strap. You don't take it. You already know it won't help. Someone places a hand on your shoulder and tells you to be brave. You don't recognize the voice. Or maybe you just don't care anymore. Then the blade hits bone. It's not gentle. It's not clean. The saw judders and skips, tearing through sinew and cartilage with all the grace of a bear opening a beehive. There's pressure, deep primal pressure, and then lightning shot pain. Your body tries to jerk away, but the ropes hold. You scream. Or maybe you don't. It's hard to tell if it's your voice echoing in the rafters or someone else's. Maybe the walls are screaming too. Maybe even the saw. This is where the term sawbones comes from, by the way. It wasn't an insult. It was descriptive. A man who could remove a limb in under a minute. That was someone you wanted around, even if he had shaky hands, even if he reused bandages. Speed was the real anesthetic. Historians still debate whether fast surgery was about pain management or just survival odds. The longer the wound was open, the more blood lost. So a quick hand was crucial. But speed often sacrificed precision. Limbs were removed at angles, leaving stumps that could never support a prosthetic. Still better, a crooked stump than a corpse. You remember hearing about a surgeon in Edinburgh who performed nearly 4,000 amputations during his lifetime. His records were filled with shorthand descriptions like cut above knee, patient fainted, recovery uncertain. You wonder how many of his patients woke up to find less of themselves left behind. You also recall a gruesome tidbit during some public dissections. The crowd would cheer when the body twitched. They thought it was proof of the soul leaving. In reality, it was probably just nerves firing. Not that it matters. No one's fact-checking mid-amputation, and then, mercifully, it stops. The saw lifts. The pressure releases. The stump is bandaged with cloth soaked in brandy or honey, not because anyone knows it helps, but because something has to be done. And that's always been the theme. Do something. Anything. Even if it's wrong. Even if it's absurd. In ancient Rome, soldiers sometimes packed wounds with cobwebs. Not just for padding, they believed spider silk had healing properties. Turns out, they weren't entirely off. Spider silk contains vitamin K, which helps with clotting. But nobody in your room knows that. They just know what's always been done. The assistant wipes sweat from his brow. The surgeon ties off the bandage. And you're still breathing. Sort of. Your mind begins to drift. Not from sleep, but from the sheer exhaustion of staying conscious. You think about those who came before you. You wonder how many made it this far. Your body is lighter now. Not metaphorically, just less. You are less. Your leg gone. Your energy bleeding. Your hope tucked somewhere in the folds of that grimy sheet. Someone calls your name. You don't answer. You're not sure if you can. The buzzing in your ears is louder than the room. The surgeon nods. He'll live. Everyone exhales. And then they leave. just like that. Off to the next room, the next body, the next horror. You're left alone, the echo of saw teeth still dancing across your bones. The candle flickers low. The blood on the floor is yours. Mostly. And just before you pass out, you wonder something strange. What if they had to do it again? You come to with a jolt. Not from pain this time, but from quiet. The kind of silence that feels like it's waiting for something. A pause between storms. You blink up at the wooden ceiling, watching dust swirl in the streaks of gray morning light. Everything hurts, but in a new way, less sharp. More like your bones have been filled with lead and your skin swapped with parchment. There's a presence beside you. He's wearing an apron, of course, and sharpening a thin, curved blade. Not the saw this time. A scalpel, more delicate, more precise. You might even call it elegant if you were being generous. You're not. His name is Bartholomew. He's the town's barber surgeon, which is a fancier way of saying he cuts hair, pulls teeth, lances, boils, and on especially fun days, amputates limbs. You watch him trim a boy's beard in the morning, then remove a tumor from a merchant's neck in the afternoon. No hand washing in between. Just a rinse in a shared bowl, and maybe a wipe down on his apron if he's feeling fancy. The dual role isn't unique. In fact, in much of Europe, during the Middle Ages and Renaissance, barbers were surgeons. Why? Because both professions involved blades. It made perfect sense if you squinted hard enough and ignored infection rates. Barber surgeons were licensed by guilds, not universities. They didn't study anatomy in hallowed halls. They learned on the job, apprenticing under more experienced barbers, attending battlefield surgeries, and occasionally experimenting on condemned criminals. Trial and error was the syllabus. Emphasis on error. Historians still argue whether barber surgeons were respected or merely tolerated. Some were revered, especially if they worked in royal courts. Others were treated like necessary evils, summoned only when bleeding broken, or otherwise cursed. You think Bartholomew is somewhere in the middle? Competent, but always just a bit too eager. He likes his work. That's unsettling. You notice his tools laid out in neat rows beside your bed. A variety of gleaming, curved horrors. Hooks, clamps, shears, forceps, some with fine filigree, others stained with the memory of previous patients. None of them look particularly friendly. One tool catches your eye, a tonsil guillotine, a thin metal loop with a sharp blade for severing inflamed tonsils in one smooth motion, or a jagged one, depending on the day. There's also a tooth key shaped like a corkscrew used to wrench out decayed molars. It often fractured the jaw in the process. Bonus, round. Bartholomew sees you looking and grins. "Don't worry," he says. "We're not doing teeth today. You don't find that comforting." As you sit up, slowly wincing, he begins to explain that today's visit is just a minor procedure. Your stump, while healing, has developed a bit of proud flesh that's tissue growing where it shouldn't. "Nothing to worry about," he says. "Just a little scraping." You lie back down. The blade touches skin. It's cold, like the whisper of winter. The pain that follows is hot, sharp, and immediate. A sudden scream beneath the surface. He hums as he works. You clench your teeth and count the rafters. You think about how this was normal for centuries. Minor surgical interventions performed with the same casualness as trimming a beard. The red and white barber pole that comes from this time. Red for blood, white for bandages, twisted together in a cheerful spiral that somehow became marketing. Barbers didn't just cut, they cupped, blood-lanced, extracted. They were the Swiss army knives of medieval healthcare. Need your abscess drained. They've got you. Need a wart removed. Say no more. Need your shoulder set after a tumble from your ox cart. Roll up your sleeve. And yet, despite their gory multitasking, they were cheaper and more accessible than university-trained physicians, who often preferred theory to practice. If you needed real work, done something involving knives, you called the barber. If you wanted someone to read your urine and recommend chanting under a full moon, you called the physician. There's an odd comfort in that simplicity. Today, everything has specialists. Back then, one man, many blades. Just hope he's sober. Bartholomew finishes. You exhale. The wound looks cleaner now, less angry. He nods in approval, then dabs the area with a cloth soaked in rose water. Not for sterilization, it just smells better than pus. He packs up his tools, hums a tavern tune, and vanishes with a flourish. You're left staring at the ceiling again, alone with your thoughts and your bruised dignity. Outside, a bell rings. You know what that means. Another surgery, another scream, another customer for the man who cuts both hair and bone with the same hand. You wonder if they'll get a nice shave first. You've learned to recognize the smell before the sound, the thick, meaty tang of blood, sweat, and candle wax hits your nostrils first. Then the creak of old wooden benches. Then the murmuring of voices, soft, curious, even a little excited. Finally, the shuffle of heavy coats and the clatter of boots. You're not in a hospital. You're in an operating theater, the kind that doesn't have curtains or privacy, just a platform, a chair, and an audience. And tonight, you're the star. The setup is simple. A tiered gallery surrounds the operating table like an amphitheater. Students and onlookers sit shoulder to shoulder, notebooks in laps, eyes wide with anticipation. They lean forward as if they're at a magic show. You try not to make eye contact. You wonder if anyone here knows your name. The surgeon enters. He's wearing a long black coat, buttoned up tightly, with a white cravat tucked under his chin. Very formal, very theatrical. He walks like a man used to being watched. And he is. Every move he makes, every incision he draws, documented, dissected, admired. He begins with a flourish, a quick explanation of your case, where the injury began, what treatments failed, why today's demonstration is necessary. You recognize some of the words, others are drowned beneath the pounding in your ears. Then he gestures toward you. You're already strapped in. A curtain of sweat glistens on your brow. The lights, such as they are, focus on your pale, trembling frame. You close your eyes, and then the cut. It's cleaner this time. The blade sharper. The surgeon's hands more assured. But the pain, oh, it's still there, like a vengeful spirit. It howls through your body, making your muscles clench and your jaw lock. You bite your lip hard. Taste blood. Again. The crowd watches silently. Occasionally, someone scribbles a note. You wonder what they write. Patient grimaced. Artery pulsed. Blood sprayed. One young student faints. That's comforting. Another leans so far forward, his ink pot topples into the aisle. The surgeon, undistracted, continues. He explains each move aloud, as though narrating a cooking show. Now we separate the tissue, we expose the joint, we remove the necrotic segment. You are a slab of meat with a name, a lesson with a heartbeat. You've heard of these theaters. Some are attached to medical colleges. Others are built into old churches. In London, the old operating theater sits high above a chapel in a wooden attic with steep seats and drafty beams. It still stands today, preserved like a gruesome diorama. Historians still argue whether these performances were more for education or entertainment. There's evidence of ticket sales, flyers posted in town squares. Come see the wonders of modern surgery. And modern it was, at least for the 18th or 19th century. But for the person under the knife, it was rarely wondrous. There's something surreal about being dissected in front of strangers. Some part of you detaches, floats up, watches the whole thing like a dream, like a band stage play where you forgot your lines and someone keeps stabbing you during intermission. You think of gladiators, of court jesters, of prisoners forced to perform. And yet, here you are, unconvicted, unpaid, and profoundly awake. The surgeon pauses, wipes his brow, nods at the crowd. They nod back. Applause would be inappropriate, but you sense it somewhere behind the silence. The appreciation of a craft well executed, of flesh well opened, of misery well delivered. Then come the sutures, thick, dark thread pulled through your skin, like leather through canvas. No anesthetic, no antiseptic, just thread and patience and the ever-present hum of background whispers. You feel a tug with each stitch, like your body is being reassembled by someone who only skimmed the instruction manual. But it holds. For now, after the final knot is tied, you're unstrapped, lifted, carried. The audience begins to file out. They talk in low tones. Some look shaken, others exhilarated. You, meanwhile, are half-conscious and very aware that your life has just been a footnote in someone's journal. You're placed back into your cot. The smell of the theater still clings to your clothes. You think you'll never forget it. The scent of iron dust and candle smoke. That night, you dream of bleachers, of faces watching, blinking, scribbling, of hands reaching into your chest and pulling out questions you don't know how to answer. And when you wake, sore, stitched, and surrounded by strangers, you wonder, was it worth it? Did they learn anything? Will it help the next person? The one after? Maybe. You hope so, because if not, you were just a spectacle. There's a rumor going around, a whisper passed from cot to cot, from patient to apprentice, from street vendor to surgeon. They've found something, a way to dull the pain. You hear it one morning while sipping tepid broth, more water than substance, and barely believe your ears. Dull the pain. Not with straps or prayers or biting sticks. Actual relief. The word spreads fast ether. A clear, sharp-smelling liquid that when inhaled sends the mind spiraling away from the body like a bird flung from a cage. Then there's chloroform, smoother, quieter, with a perfume-like sweetness, masking its true power. You're skeptical at first. Everyone is. After all, for centuries, pain has been the price of healing. But curiosity is contagious, and desperate people are always the first to volunteer. The first public demonstration you witness is chaotic. A woman with a breast tumor is laid out on a table. Normally, she'd be writhing, screaming, possibly passing out from shock before the operation is halfway done. But today she sleeps, deep, unmoving. The surgeon cuts. The tumor is removed. The stitches go in. She doesn't flinch, doesn't moan. She lies still, as stone only waking after it's all done, with no memory, no screaming, no shattered nerves. You and the others stare in disbelief. For the first time, surgery looks peaceful. But peace has a price. Ether is volatile, highly flammable. One spark from a careless lantern, and the room could go up like a haystack in July. More than one surgeon has learned this the hard way. And chloroform. It's a quieter killer. Too much, and the patient never wakes up. There's no dial, no regulator, just a cloth, a bottle, and a prayer that today isn't the day you guess wrong. Historians still argue whether the early use of anesthesia did more harm than good. Was it a miracle or a blind leap into chemical chaos? One thing is certain: it changed the game forever. You hear of surgeons performing longer, more complex procedures now that patients can lie still for hours. Tumors that were once left to rot are removed. Bones once left broken are reset. The limits of the blade stretch further because the screaming no longer sets the tempo. But not everyone is thrilled. Some old-school doctors grumble. They believe pain has value, that suffering purifies, that enduring the knife is a kind of spiritual trial. One grizzled physician says, if they don't feel it, how will they know they've lived through something? You decide not to point out that many don't live through it. Then come the accidents. One man jerks awake, mid-procedure, thrashing violently, only partially sedated. He bites his tongue in half before they can restrain him again. Another never wakes up. They say the dose was fine, must have been his constitution. You wonder how many others will be blamed for their own deaths before dosing becomes a science instead of a guessing game. There's also the equipment. It's rudimentary. A rag soaked in ether, a funnel fitted over the nose. Some devices resemble medieval masks with leather straps and brass fittings. They look more like torture gear than healing tools. And yet, despite the risks, the demand grows. You're offered the chance to try it. A lingering infection in your side needs lancing. Before this would have meant restraints, biting down, maybe vomiting from the shock. Now they ask, would you like to sleep through it? You hesitate. The bottle looks innocent enough, clear, ordinary, but the air around it smells sharp and medicinal. like lightning in a bottle. You nod. The cloth is pressed gently over your mouth and nose. Breathe deep, they say. You do. The world begins to hum. Your limbs grow heavy. The ceiling sways like a ship at sea. And then blackness. No dreams, no fear. Just absence. When you wake, it's done. The pain is there. Yes, but muted, like an echo down a long hallway. Your breath is shallow. Your mind swims. But your body is whole. No scream, no terror. Just quiet. You lie there, stunned, grateful. And yet, something feels different. You've grown used to pain, to earning survival through agony. Now it feels like you've cheated the system, like you skipped a chapter. You're not sure how to feel about it, but when you hear the next patient scream from the room down the hall, the old way, the raw way, you know, one thing for sure. You don't want to go back. You smell smoke. But it's not fire. It's burnt bone. That's how this next ordeal begins. You're led into a room where a man stands next to a strange table covered in rough leather straps and iron rings. On the wall, a collection of drills. Not carpentry drills, skull drills, the kind used for trepanation, the ancient practice of drilling a hole into the human head to let something out. You're not quite sure what. The air is thick with incense and something sharper metallic. The man standing over you isn't a surgeon in the modern sense. He's more priest than physician, more alchemist than doctor. Long robes sunken, eyes, fingers stained with ash and chalk. He explains that your headaches, your confusion, your dark thoughts all point to one thing: a pressure inside the skull. The solution: relieve it. Give the demons or humors or vapors, depending on the century, a way out. You try to back away, but you don't get far. You're eased gently but firmly onto the table. The straps go around your chest, arms, forehead. You are a guest of the drill now. Trepanation is older than you think. The oldest skulls bearing trepanation holes date back over 7,000 years. From Peru to France, from Greece to Egypt, this procedure has left its little round signature all over history. Somehow, humans all across the globe had the same idea. Maybe if I open up the head, the madness will leave. Sometimes it did. Sometimes the person survived. In fact, in some ancient cultures, trepanation wasn't even just a medical act. It was spiritual. A rite of passage. A cure for possession. a way to connect with the gods, or silence them. You feel a tap on your skull. The practitioner draws a circle with charcoal just above your temple. This is the spot, he whispers. You ask what happens next. He doesn't answer, because next is the brace and bit, a hand-powered drill with a bone-chilling whine. He places it on the charcoal circle and begins to crank. You hear the scraping of metal on bone. It starts as pressure, a vibration in your teeth. Then comes the pain, not a stabbing, but a grinding, groaning protest from your very skeleton. No anesthesia, just straps and desperation. You try to scream. The sound barely escapes your throat. It's caught somewhere between disbelief and agony. He pauses to wipe sweat from his brow, then continues. Halfway through, he changes tools. A trepan, a cylindrical saw designed specifically for skulls. It removes a perfect plug of bone, as though your cranium were a wheel of cheese. You smell it now, the unmistakable scent of burnt ivory. That's your skull, your actual head smoldering under friction. Historians still argue whether ancient trepanation was used more for medical necessity or spiritual cleansing. Some say it was a primitive form of treating traumatic brain injury. Others believe it was just deeply embedded ritual. In some cultures, people had multiple holes in their skulls, spaced out over years, and survived. Their bones show healing regeneration. These weren't accidental survivors. They were veterans. You are not a veteran. You are a first-timer. And you are not having a good time. When the final layer of bone gives way, there's a pop, a release, like a cork from a bottle. The drill lifts, and you gasp, not in relief, but from sheer instinct. Your vision sparkles. Your limbs twitch. The room folds in on itself for a moment. He peers into the hole. You think he sees something. You hope he doesn't. He mutters a few words, an incantation, a diagnosis. You can't tell. Then he applies a salve made of honey, crushed herbs, and something sticky that smells like pine sap. A plug of linen goes over the wound, held in place, with a bandage wound tight around your head. You'll sleep better now, he says. You doubt that very much. In the days that follow, your thoughts blur. Sometimes you feel oddly light. Other times, like your brain is sloshing inside your skull. You wonder if you're supposed to feel that. No one answers, because no one really knows. That's the truth behind trepanation. It's mostly guesswork. It always has been. Even today, some fringe communities, yes, in the modern world, still practice it as a form of mental liberation. a way to increase consciousness. You wonder if they also use straps. You lie still, head bandaged, skull one layer thinner. You've faced blades, saws, leeches, now a hole in the head. And all along the way, people say, "This will make you better." You wonder what better even means anymore. You've become intimately familiar with the sharp clink of metal on metal. It echoes from the tray beside your bed, the one now carefully arranged with the tools of the trade. They lie there like polite silverware, waiting to ruin your day. Each piece has its role, its moment, and each has a history longer and bloodier than you care to imagine. You don't need an introduction, but let's take stock together anyway. First, the bone saw, still the king of surgical instruments. Long-toothed, brutally efficient. If you're lucky, it's been sharpened. If not, well, the saw does the work. Eventually. Then there's the tenaculum, a vicious-looking hook with a needle-sharp point used to grab blood vessels or flesh and hold them in place. It's the kind of tool that makes you wonder who first decided it was necessary and how many patients bled before someone realized it helped. Beside that sits the trocar, a pointed rod used to relieve internal pressure. It was often shoved into bloated stomachs or punctured into abscesses. No one asked the patient if they were ready. You simply felt it. One of the more elegant pieces is the amputation knife, curved like a scythe, with a gleaming edge, and a handle darkened by countless hands. It's designed for speed, for efficiency. The arc of a single movement separating flesh from identity. Some tools, though, are less poetic. The bullet extractor, a slender, cruel device used during battlefield surgeries, was often used without any hope of removing the bullet cleanly. In fact, it usually caused more damage than the bullet itself. But they had to try. And the cautery iron, heated over a flame until it glowed red, is used not only to seal bleeding wounds, but sometimes to close stumps. You've heard stories of people screaming through the cloth in their mouths, writhing against restraints as flesh hissed and seared. Some fainted from the smell alone. You've seen them use it. You've smelled it. And now it's sitting on your tray. You ask if it's necessary. They say, just in case. You hate just in case. Historians still argue whether these tools were designed for healing or simply to reduce the horror for the surgeon. After all, the cleaner the tool, the quicker the cut, the easier it was to walk away. But for the patient, for you, every device feels like a threat wrapped in brass. Not all tools were made of metal, though. In some places, surgeons used shark teeth or obsidian blades sharper than steel, and often more precise. Some early South American cultures performed surgeries using tools so sharp that modern researchers have struggled to replicate their edge. Meanwhile, in 18th century Europe, many surgical kits were passed down from generation to generation, like a family heirloom. Here, son, one day, these forceps will be yours. You try not to gag. You've also noticed something peculiar. Despite their function, despite the gore, many of these tools are beautiful, intricately engraved, polished, balanced. There's craftsmanship in their cruelty, aesthetic pain. One scalpel has the initials of 3 previous owners carved into its ivory handle. A little grim family tree of incisions and incantations. They offer you laudanum before they begin. It's opium-based, makes the world blur around the edges. You accept. It doesn't stop the pain, but it takes the panic and packs it into a quiet little box in the back of your mind. They start with the tenaculum. You flinch, even though you're supposed to be numb. A voice murmurs, "Hold still," as if you've got a choice. They work quickly, with purpose. The tools move from tray to hand to flesh as naturally as breath. You think of soldiers lying in trenches, of women on kitchen tables, of sailors pinned to crates on ships, all being treated with the same instruments. You are one thread in a very long, very red tapestry. At one point, a tool slips. There's a muttered apology. Something warm runs down your side. No one seems alarmed. The cautery iron is last. They check the bandages, then hold it over the brazier until it glows like a tiny sun. They bring it close. The hiss as it meets your skin is unforgettable. A snake in a bottle. A scream in metal form. The pain is white-hot immediate, but brief. And then, stillness. No bleeding, no movement, only the soft crackle of cooling flesh and the weight of every tool going back onto the tray. Clink, clink, clink. You exhale. You're whole again. Or close enough. The tools are covered. The tray disappears. And for a while, all is quiet. Until the next time they clatter into place. You wake to shouting. Not angry shouting. Urgent shouting. Orders barked in clipped tones. Boots thudding across mud. The unmistakable thump of wounded bodies being dropped onto wooden tables. You're not in the quiet little surgery room anymore. You're in a field hospital, and the war has found you. The air is thicker here, humid, with blood, gunpowder, sweat, and dread. You can practically taste the copper in it. Flies hover near every wound. Sawdust is thrown across the floor, not for decoration, but to soak up what will inevitably spill. You're not the only patient. There are rows of you now, some groaning, some screaming, some long past both. A man across from you is missing an eye. Another clutches a thigh that's no longer attached to his body. No one looks clean. No one looks okay. You try to sit up. A hand pushes you back down. Stay still, someone mutters. You're lucky you're not missing more. You glance down. Your bandages are fresh, but already spotted. You don't remember being moved. You don't remember much at all. A surgeon enters no formal wear here. He's got rolled sleeves, a bloodied apron, and a bone saw swinging from his belt like a knight's sword. His expression is unreadable. He points at the next soldier in line and calls, "Bring him up." The man is carried limp but conscious. A shattered leg, dirty, torn, possibly infected. The surgeon doesn't hesitate. He grabs the saw. This is wartime surgery, and there's no room for delicate deliberation. In battlefields from the Napoleonic Wars to the American Civil War, this was standard practice. Remove the limb before the infection spreads. Forget healing. Forget saving tissue. Amputate fast, move on to the next. Lives were measured in minutes. Skill was measured in speed. Historians still argue whether more lives were saved or lost this way. Some records show astonishing survival rates when surgery was performed within 24 hours of injury. Others document long trails of preventable deaths due to lack of sanitation, pain management, or even simple hydration. You watch as the procedure begins. No anesthesia here. Not enough time. The soldier is given a strap of leather and 2 men to hold him. The saw goes in. His scream joins the chorus, already echoing through the tent. The surgeon never looks up. When it's done, he tosses the bloody limb into a corner already stacked with others. A silent, grotesque pile of what used to be people. You turn away, but not before noticing something strange. There's organization in the chaos. In one corner, a man boils tools between patients. Another hands out rolls of linen soaked in vinegar. There's a rhythm to the madness. Ugly, imperfect, but functioning. This is where modern trauma surgery is born. Out of necessity, out of war. You hear about a French military surgeon, Dominique Jean Larrey, who invented the ambulance volante flying ambulances that could rush the wounded from the battlefield to nearby field hospitals. Revolutionary for the time. His system saved thousands. And you wonder if some version of that wagon brought you here. They work on you next. Not a major operation, just a clean and check. But even that hurts. They cut away old bandages, scrape tissue, wash the wound with spirits. You nearly pass out from the sting. A young assistant says, "You're healing well." You'd argue, but the words won't come. Someone nearby coughs a wet, rattling sound. You glance over. He doesn't look good. They cover him moments later. In field hospitals, death is more common than silence. You lie back, staring at the canvas above. There are patches in the roof where the rain drips through. One hits your cheek, cold, sharp, real. And yet you're still here, through bone saws, bullet extractors, and battlefield tents, through surgeons who never meet your eyes, and apprentices who wince on your behalf. You wonder how many more will make it out, and how many more will just disappear into the pile in the corner. Because out here, medicine isn't science. It's survival. Night falls, but you're still wide awake. Not from pain this time, though there's plenty of that, but because you're listening. Something's going on outside the tent, a strange rustling. Voices hushed in the dark, footsteps that aren't supposed to be there. And then you hear it, a shovel. You know what that means. It means the body snatchers are back. In times like these, cadavers are worth their weight in gold, not for mourning, but for study. Surgical students, eager to learn the secrets of the human form, need bodies. The universities need them. The surgeons in training need them. Even the professionals need them, because textbooks can only teach so much, and practicing on the living has limitations. But corpses tell no tales, and the law doesn't always keep up with demand. So here they come, resurrection men, creeping into graveyards, cloaked by fog, their pockets jingling with silver, earned in the most morbid of trades. They dig fast. 2 feet down, not 6. They're not after coffins, they're after fresh meat. Limbs, pliable skin intact, bones still clean enough to name. You'd be surprised how fast they can lift a body. Less than 15 minutes, if they're skilled. Wrap it in cloth, toss it in a cart, vanish into alleyways. By dawn, it's in a dissection hall, stripped and pinned like a grim butterfly. You overhear a conversation between 2 students. They've just secured a specimen. They're giddy. One boasts that they got it fresh, only 3 days arid, as if he's describing fruit at a market. Historians still argue how complicit universities were. Officially, they condemned grave robbing. Unofficially, they looked the other way, because the body on the table made better doctors, better surgeons. In theory, you lie still in your cot, watching shadows dance across the tent walls. You wonder if the man who worked on you ever practiced on the dead. You hope he did, better them than you. But the line gets blurry. Sometimes the bodies came from workhouses, or prisons, or hospitals. Not all were volunteered. Not all were dead. There are whispers, unconfirmed, unproven, that a few resurrectionists got impatient and helped the dying along. Fewer witnesses that way. You try not to think about it. Especially not when you hear the wheel of a cart passing by in the dark. Especially not when you think of the empty cot next to you, the one that was full yesterday. Even today you hear about it. In the 1800s, the Burke and Hare murders in Edinburgh exposed the truth. Some resurrectionists weren't digging, they were killing. Their clients didn't ask questions. Bodies appeared. Payments were made. That's all. It got so bad that people started burying their loved ones under iron cages called mort safes. Cemeteries became fortresses. Funerals added guards. Death wasn't private anymore. It was business. And still, the dissections continued. You've seen one. You didn't want to, but your nurse insisted it would strengthen the spirit. They lay the body on a stone slab, cold, pale, still. The students gather like birds, clutching notebooks and charcoal. The instructor wields a scalpel like a conductor's baton. He begins at the chest, cuts smooth and confident. Muscle pulled back, bone exposed. Each organ is described in reverent detail. Here is the liver. Here the spleen. Note the curvature of the ribs. It's methodical, almost peaceful, until they reach the face. Then everything feels efferent. The illusion breaks. You remember this was a person, someone with dreams and breakfast preferences and favorite songs. Not anymore. The students lean in. They're eager, hungry for knowledge. You don't blame them, but you still flinch. You wonder how many doctors carved their way to skill through corpses like this. You wonder if your own surgeon got his start the same way, if he learned to slice by slicing what couldn't scream. Maybe it's better that way. And yet, there's a strange kind of respect here. A silent agreement between the living and the dead. A grim transaction, your silence for our progress. The body doesn't protest, and the world keeps turning. You lie back in your cot, eyelids heavy. You try to sleep, but you keep imagining dirt being shoveled somewhere out there, and wondering whose body is being donated next, and whether the students are taking notes in pencil or chalk. You're feeling better today? Well, less awful. You sit up, without assistance, sip a thin broth without spilling it, and even stand for a few seconds before the dizziness pulls you back down. A win by any historical standard. The nurse compliments your color. You're not sure what that means exactly. Less gray, slightly rosier than a corpse. Regardless, it earns you a fresh dressing and a visit from a very serious man with a very strange request. He's not here to treat you. He's here to protect you from invisible forces, from bad air, from angry spirits, or so he claims. Today, you're learning about the superstitions and rituals of surgery, the side of medicine that doesn't involve anatomy charts or sterilization, but talismans, chants, and bizarre traditions passed down for generations. He dabs your forehead with vinegar and places a toad in a cloth bag at the foot of your bed. To absorb the illness, he says. You blink. He's serious. You try not to laugh. Superstition was once deeply embedded in surgical practice. Before germs were a concept, before infection had a name, surgeons reached for rituals, blending faith, folklore, and fear into something that looked like comfort or control. You've seen others receive stranger treatments. One woman was instructed to wear a garland of garlic and sage during her labor. Another was given burnt sheep dung mixed with honey to treat a chest infection. She ate it. Twice. And then there are the chants, old Latin phrases, murmured prayers, rhythmic tapping of fingers on wood. The kind of things that seem harmless until you realize they're being used instead of cleaning wounds or checking vital signs. Historians still argue whether these rituals provided psychological relief or just delayed real treatment. Some believe belief alone could boost recovery. Others point out that many cures came with deadly side effects, like mercury or lead poultices. Your toad squirms in the bag. You wonder how many illnesses it's supposed to cure before it's considered used up. There's also an ongoing debate among the staff about when to operate. Not medically, astrologically. Some won't perform surgery when Mars is in retrograde. Others refuse to cut on Tuesdays. Your recent operation was nearly delayed because of a solar eclipse. One nurse ties red thread around your wrist. Protection, she says, against what she doesn't specify. Another insists on placing an iron nail under your pillow to draw out the poison. You don't ask questions. At this point, you'll allow any non-invasive nonsense if it means fewer drills and saws. You hear stories. In some places, frog skins were dried and powdered to stop bleeding. In others, cabbage leaves were tied over wounds to draw out the heat. One man was cured of a fever, allegedly by burying his shirt at a crossroads during a full moon. He never had to wear it again. So that's something. And then there are the surgeons themselves sometimes as superstitious as their patients. You watch one sharpen his blade while whispering a rhyme. Another won't begin until he walks around the table clockwise 3 times. You wonder how many of these habits are based in tradition and how many are just nerves disguised as rituals. There's a strange logic here. When you can't control the bleeding, you control the symbols. When you can't stop the fever, you stop the air. When you don't understand the body, you try to appease the gods or the ghosts. One tale tells of a village where surgery was only allowed during the waning moon, so the wound would close with the sky. Another describes a surgeon who hung bells near the operating table to confuse the spirits and prevent them from stealing the patient's soul mid-procedure. You laugh at first, then pause, because in a world of bone saws and unwashed hands, maybe a little superstition is the only thing keeping everyone sane. You shift in bed. The toad's bag rustles softly. The nail digs slightly into your mattress. The garlic necklace from yesterday still lingers faintly in the room, mingling with the scent of old blood and vinegar. You don't believe in magic, but you're not exactly sending the toad away either. The first thing you notice when the new surgeon enters the room is how clean he looks. It's almost unsettling. Crisp sleeves, pale gloves, a cloth over his mouth. His instruments gleam under the lamplight, laid out like silverware at a banquet. There's a faint scent of alcohol, not the drinking kind, lingering in the air, replacing the usual perfume of pus and panic. He introduces himself simply Joseph. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't mutter Latin under his breath. He doesn't light incense or hang garlic. Instead, he washes his hands. Twice. And just like that, the entire energy of the room changes. Joseph believes in something radical, something most of the other surgeons scoff at, even mock behind closed doors. He believes in germs. You don't know the term yet, but you will. The invisible enemies, the ones that hitch rides on fingers and instruments lurking in cloth and congealed blood. They're small, microscopic, even so tiny that some still deny they exist. But Joseph treats them like real, deadly threats. And he's not alone. He follows the teachings of a man named Ignaz Semmelweis, a Hungarian physician who begged doctors to wash their hands before delivering babies. His discovery: maternal deaths dropped dramatically when doctors used soap between autopsies and childbirth. Historians still argue why Semmelweis's ideas were rejected for so long. Was it arrogance? Resistance to change? Or was it the simple discomfort of being told that they, the healers were the problem. Either way, Joseph believes. And more importantly, he practices. He boils his instruments. He cleans the table. He asks for fresh linens, not rags repurposed from the last unfortunate soul. He dips his tools in a solution that stings your nose and makes your eyes water. It smells clean. This is the beginning of antiseptic surgery, a movement sparked by another man, Joseph Lister, who, inspired by Louis Pasteur's work with bacteria, began spraying carbolic acid in operating rooms and over open wounds. It was crude. It was messy. But it worked. Your procedure today is minor, just a stitch removal and a wound check, but everything about it feels different. The tools don't look like they've been stored in a boot. The nurse ties back her hair. Even the table has been scrubbed. You watch in disbelief as Joseph wipes his hands one more time before starting. You brace for pain, but the touch is precise, gentle, practiced. No fumbling, no oops. Just calm efficiency. You ask him quietly why others don't work like this. He smiles a little, sad. Change comes slow, he says. You've heard stories about resistance, of old doctors who mocked Lister, refusing to spray their wards with chemicals, of hospitals where the staff laughed at hand washing, of operations performed in blood-stained coats, a badge of honor, they called it. They thought cleanliness was unnecessary. That surgery was supposed to be messy. That pain and death were inevitable companions of the knife. But Joseph disagrees, and the numbers are on his side. You hear him whisper to the nurse, "Our infection rate this month down again." You wonder if you're part of that number. You hope so. Historians still argue about when antiseptic techniques truly took hold. Some say the resistance lasted into the early 20th century. Others point to specific hospitals or wars as turning points. But everyone agrees, once antiseptic methods were embraced, everything changed. Mortality rates dropped. Surgeries became safer. Hospitals became places of healing, not waiting rooms for the afterlife. You look around now and realize how much you've seen, how far this journey has taken you from leeches to laudanum, bone saws, to chloroform toads, to carbolic acid. You're still here. And for the first time, you feel like maybe you'll stay that way. Joseph packs up his tools. No blood, no panic. Just a quiet click of the tray being wheeled away. You close your eyes, not in fear this time, but in something almost resembling peace. You wake to bird song, not groans, not saws, not screams muffled behind linen curtains, but actual birds outside the window, chirping in the early sun, like they've been waiting for you to notice. It takes a moment to register just how different the air feels. The room is cleaner, brighter. You're not lying on a board anymore, but a bed with springs, sheets, a pillow that wasn't repurposed from a horse blanket. This is new. A nurse enters starched uniform hair in a tight bun. She smiles at you, but doesn't say much. She checks your temperature, your pulse, your chart. She writes something down. It's also efficient. You're not used to this kind of calm because somehow, without anyone announcing it, you've made it to a modern hospital. Not just a cleaner room, but a whole new philosophy. Gone are the barbers with belts of knives. Gone are the superstition-soaked cloths and the muttered chants. Here there are wards and schedules and rotating staff. There are things called protocols. This is the beginning of organized medicine. You're wheeled on a proper gurney, no less, into a real operating room. It's not made of wood. It doesn't smell like ale and candles. It smells sterile, cold, like something scientific is about to happen. Overhead, bright white lights bloom like artificial stars. Surgeons appear in masks and gloves. Their instruments come wrapped in cloth and opened only when needed. There's a gentle beeping sound nearby, some kind of monitor you don't understand, but it comforts you. They speak in quiet tones, like librarians. No yelling, no public gallery, no wide-eyed students scribbling notes on your pain. You hear one say, "Start the anesthesia." You don't even resist. This time it's precise. Not ether from a rag, not a guesstimate soaked into cotton. It's calculated, measured. The nurse checks your weight. The doctor reads your chart. The dosage is exact like a recipe. You count backward from 10. You only make it to 7. When you wake, you're sore, but whole. They explain that your operation was a success. They use words you don't entirely understand, but the tone is reassuring. There's talk of sterile fields and antibiotic prophylaxis. Someone even uses the term post-operative care. You've entered an era where pain isn't a rite of passage anymore. It's a symptom to manage. Where knowledge is gathered, compared, reviewed. Where the body is not a mystery, but a machine with parts, systems, pathways. Historians still argue when this shift became irreversible. Was it with Lister's antiseptics, the introduction of anesthesia, the formalization of hospitals? Most agree it was a convergence science. Chemistry and compassion finally sharing a table. You look out the window. Trees sway. The world moves on. And still, traces of the old world linger. One nurse taps a wooden figure on her necklace before entering your room. You overhear a patient asking for garlic soup to pull the infection. A janitor sweeps the floor and mutters a prayer in the corner. Superstition doesn't vanish. It adapts. But now it sits beside science, not in place of it. Your wound is healing faster than anyone expected. The dressings are changed with gloved hands. You're given real food, water that doesn't taste like rust, medicine in measured doses. You almost feel human again. And as you rest, you think of all the rooms you've passed through the dim barber's shop, the battlefield tent, the operating theater filled with eyes, the sharp edges, the cold tools, the pain, all of it slowly fading behind you like a bad dream. You're still here, and the horror, it's finally behind you. You take your first steps alone. It's shaky, awkward even. One leg braced the other, steadying with the help of a wooden cane. But you do it. You stand. You walk. You leave the bed, not as a patient, but as something more, a survivor. And yet the memories trail behind you, like a second shadow. Even in this cleaner, quieter hospital, you still flinch when you hear metal clink on a tray. You still instinctively scan the room for restraints. You still half expect someone to hand you a leather strap and say, "Bite down," because you remember what surgery used to be. You remember the faces not just of the surgeons, but of the ones who didn't make it. The groans that faded into silence. The eyes that opened and never closed again. The piles of limbs. The smell of burnt skin. The fever that took names without asking permission. You wonder if this place, this modern room with its charts and beeping machines, knows about those ghosts. Probably not. But you do. And in small ways, they still shape what happens here. You see it in the design of the operating table, adjustable, padded, hygienic. A far cry from the plank you once lay on, splintered and soaked in memory. You hear it in the quiet respect the staff show each other. None of the bravado of the old barber surgeons, the performative bloodletting, the frantic race against agony. You feel it in the painkillers, now dosed precisely, labeled, carefully administered, kindly. No more guessing. No more cloth-soaked prayers. A physician comes to check on you. He flips through your chart, nods approvingly, and says, "You'll be discharged soon." You ask, "How long until I'm fully healed?" He smiles. Depends on what you mean by healed. You let that sit. Because you know now that healing isn't just about skin. It's about memory, about reconciling the body's survival with what the soul witnessed. And your soul, well, it saw everything. You saw the horror of surgery without anesthesia, the trial by blade that left so many behind. You saw bloodletting by leech and faith alike. You heard bones break and felt nerves scream. You sat under the saw and watched the crowd take notes. You've been opened, drained, drilled, stitched, burned, and somehow you're still here. You, not stronger, not braver, just awake. More awake than you've ever been. And while the world outside your hospital window now moves at a quieter pace, cleaner, brighter, and full of strange new machines, you carry the past with you. Not as a burden, but as a warning. Because for every antiseptic bottle, there's a rusty hook somewhere forgotten. For every sterilized needle, there's an old bone saw hanging in a museum. And for every patient recovering in silence, there are echoes. Faint, but persistent. You hear them sometimes, in the ticking of the clock, in the hush of the halls, in the whisper of your cane on the polished floor. Now that the light is fading and the memories have quieted to a murmur, you lie back. You feel the weight of your body sink into the mattress. Not the rough wood of an old surgery table, but something softer, supportive, clean. Your breath slows. The corners of the room blur gently in your vision. No scalpels here, no toads in burlap, just the low hum of piece of time having passed. Let yourself drift now. Let your thoughts float lazily. Through the corridors you've just walked, those shadowed alleys of old medicine, those candle-lit operating theaters, those muddy battlefield tents. You've passed through them all like a ghost lingering in history's hallways. And now you can rest. Because even though the horrors were real, they're no longer waiting at your bedside. They're cataloged, retired, replaced with gentler hands and quieter tools. The nightmare has softened into knowledge, and the screaming has finally stopped. So close your eyes, if they haven't closed already. Breathe in the quiet, and if you hear a distant clink, a soft whisper of saw against bone, don't be afraid. That was then. This is now. You're safe. You're whole. You're here.